The fluorescent lights above the Clean Max boardroom hummed faintly, their sterile glow making every glass panel gleam. I sat at one end of the long mahogany table, the only woman in a lineup of gray suits. Karen Whitfield, director of operations, folded her manicured hands in front of her as if she were about to pray. Her voice was steady, almost kind, as she slid a printed packet toward me. "Lauren, as part of our strategic restructure, your annual salary will be adjusted from $99,000 to $30,000. Her words cut through the room like acid. My breath caught, but I forced my face to remain still. Around the table, 3 executives avoided my eyes, their expressions sculpted into a bland neutrality I knew was practiced. Karen tilted her head, lips curling into a smile too polished to be real. "We value your dedication, of course. This is an across-the-board initiative. Everyone is tightening their belts." I stared at the bold numbers on the page 99 Oersalern slashed to $30,000. It wasn't restructuring, it was execution. My throat tightened, but I didn't let them see. I set the packet down and met Karen's gaze. "Quite a cut," I said evenly. Her smile widened, the corners sharpening. "We've also installed new monitoring systems, updated trackers on all company laptops, lab gear, even badge access. It's to streamline accountability. You'll notice changes starting this week." The casualness of her tone was the knife twist. Surveillance. They weren't just cutting me down, they wanted me boxed in. Every move watched, every experiment logged against their clock. I felt the air in the room shift. One of the finance men cleared his throat. "We hope you'll stay, Dr. Pierce. You're a valued member of the team." Valued. The word was a mockery. I folded the packet once, twice, sliding it back across the table. "I'll think about it." Karen's brows flickered upward, as if she'd expected begging. Instead, I pushed back my chair, the scrape against the floor echoing louder than any protest could have. As I walked out of that glass box, my reflection ghosted on the pane beside me. They thought they'd cornered me, but they had no idea what I'd already kept beyond their reach. The drive home felt longer than usual, even though traffic was light. By the time I pulled into the cracked driveway, the packet from the boardroom sat unopened on the passenger seat. I grabbed it anyway, slid it under a stack of mail, and carried the weight of it inside. Our house wasn't much 2 bedrooms, thin walls, and a furnace that rattled when it kicked on, but it was steady ground. Stability mattered more than space when you were raising a 13-year-old with fragile lungs. I set my bag down on the kitchen counter and scanned the bills piled there. Hospital invoices, insurance denials, prescription receipts, each one a reminder that Isla's inhalers cost more than my mortgage. She came bounding in a few minutes later, backpack sliding off one shoulder. "Mom, we're out of almond milk," she said, her voice already raspy from gym class. I nodded, forcing a smile. "I'll get some tomorrow." "How was school okay?" "We've got a science fair coming up." "Can I do something on chemical reactions?" She grinned, inhaler visible in her hoodie pocket. My throat tightened. How could I tell her that the people I'd built my career with had just cut my salary by 2/3, that I was supposed to keep her medicine stocked with less than half the income we depended on? I spooned pasta onto her plate, kept my smile in place, and asked about her friends. She didn't need to know, not tonight. Later, after she went upstairs coughing lightly, I slipped into the garage and closed the door. The silence pressed heavy. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. Fear twisted in my stomach, but my heartbeat stayed steady. They thought desperation would break me. They thought medical bills and single motherhood made me easy prey. I let the thought settle, sharper than any fear. What they didn't understand was that I'd been preparing for this moment all along. The basement smelled faintly of bleach and rust, the kind of scent that clung to skin no matter how many times you washed your hands. I flicked on the old pull-chain light, its yellow glow settling over battered counters and second-hand equipment. stools with cracked vinyl, test tubes stacked in plastic bins, notebooks swollen from years of chemical stains. This wasn't a company lab. Polished and funded, it was mine. I ran my hand across the first counter I'd ever set up here, remembering the nights when Isla was still a toddler asleep upstairs. CleanMax had thrown me the sanitation division like it was garbage. Numbers bleeding, sales flat, reviews brutal. Nobody wanted it. They thought it was dead weight. But in this basement, after hours, I mixed, tested, and rebuilt formulas until they worked. Within 3 years, the division they dismissed was pulling top revenue. They paraded the numbers in their quarterly reports, smiling at results they hadn't earned. Never trust them with the crown jewels. I'd whispered to myself more times than I could count, scribbling in margins at 2 a.m. That whisper had become a mantra, a shield. I walked to the far wall and unlocked the steel cabinet I'd bolted into the foundation. Inside, rows of samples glinted faintly under the bulb. Next to them, envelopes stuffed with receipts, flash drives labeled with dates, hard copies of lab logs. I pulled down a black binder, its cover warped, pages brittle. In the margins, I had written not just formulas but timestamps, video links, even receipts for the cheap glassware I bought online. The screen on my old camcorder flickered when I tested it. Grainy footage showing a younger me in a stained lab coat, Isla in pajamas eating cereal at the bar while I mixed a batch behind her. Proof of time, place, ownership, proof of independence. I stacked the notebooks neatly, one over the other, until the weight of them pressed into my palms. They weren't just dusty records. They were leverage. Could these notebooks scribbled in bleach and midnight ink really topple the empire that had just tried to cut me down? The house was quiet, the kind of silence that only came after midnight when even the furnace seemed to rest. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee gone cold, a red pen in one hand and my employee contract spread out in front of me. The packet from the boardroom was shoved to the far corner, but this thin stack of legal language was the battlefield that mattered. I read each line slowly, circling phrases, underlining clauses until the paper bled with marks. Most of it was predictable non-compete agreements, confidentiality, intellectual property claims. But then my eyes landed on the line I'd skimmed past years ago. Company intellectual property includes all work produced during designated hours, on company premises, and with company resources. I leaned back, exhaling hard. The words stared back at me, sharp as a blade. My basement lab, my notebooks, the receipts I'd kept religiously, all of it existed outside those boundaries. Every breakthrough that had driven CleanMax's success had been born here, in the margins of my time, with equipment they never paid for. My heart steadied. The fear that had clung to me since the meeting began to thin, replaced by something else, something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. Upstairs. I heard Isla cough lightly in her sleep, a reminder of why I couldn't afford to gamble and why I also couldn't afford to yield. Risking everything terrified me, but letting them strip away the life I'd built for her was worse. I pressed the red pen into the margin, drawing a box around the claws until the paper nearly tore. They thought this language protected them. They thought they owned me, my time, my work. But in that moment, I realized the contract wasn't their shield. It was my weapon. What if the lines they thought safeguarded their empire were already wrapped tight around their own necks? The cafe was half empty, the kind of place where the hiss of the espresso machine drowned out quiet conversations. I slid into a corner booth, a worn leather bag at my side. A few minutes later, Alicia Grant arrived, sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of presence that made even silence feel decisive. "You must be Dr. Pierce." She extended her hand, grip firm. "Let's see what you've got." I unzipped the bag and laid everything out, binders swollen with notes, receipts yellowed at the edges, flash drives labeled with dates, even the camcorder with grainy footage of late nights in the basement. Alicia flipped through it all with the calm precision of someone who had seen hundreds of cases but wasn't easily impressed. When she finally looked up, her expression softened into a small, deliberate nod. "This is airtight. We'll file immediately. If they try to fight you, we'll bury them in proof." Relief flickered through me, but only for a moment. I knew Clean Max well enough to expect they wouldn't sit still. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with Alicia's name. Her voice carried an edge. "Lauren, you were right to come fast. Clean Max Legal just filed patent applications identical to 2 of your formulas. Someone inside tried to preempt you." My stomach dropped, but Alicia didn't pause. "Your timestamps, your receipts, your video logs, there's no contest. Their attempt collapses under scrutiny. We'll move forward." I closed my eyes, the weight of both fury and vindication pressing in. They weren't just trying to cut me out, they were already stealing. That afternoon, my work phone lit up with Karen's name. I answered, keeping my voice smooth. "Lauren," she cooed, "just wanted to check in. We know the restructure's been difficult. Are you managing okay?" I let a small laugh slip through. "One day at a time." She murmured something about support and wellness, but I heard the false concern beneath every syllable. I kept my tone steady, never giving her more than polite agreement. If they already tried to steal my work once, how far would they go when they realized what I truly owned? I walked back into CleanMax the next morning with a careful weight in my steps, just enough drag to look defeated. Karen passed me in the hallway, her heels clicking sharp against the tiles, and I made sure to sigh as I tucked my badge into the reader. At lunch, I lingered by the break room coffee pot while 2 junior chemists chatted nearby. When Karen stepped in, I let my voice carry just enough. "Between Isla's treatments and the mortgage, I don't know how long I can hold out." Her head turned like a hawk spotting prey. She slid me a sympathetic smile. "We'll see what we can do. Lauren, no one wants to lose you." I nodded, feigning gratitude, but inside I was already elsewhere. That night, in my home office with the blinds drawn, I opened a private account and drafted a message. Thomas Greer, head of R&D at Summit Labs. We'd met once at a trade expo years ago. He had a reputation for valuing results over politics. My hands shook only once before hitting send. The reply came faster than expected, a video call, scheduled for the following evening. When his face filled the screen, his voice was brisk but warm. "Show me what you've got." I walked him through the real portfolio cold water compounds, sanitation agents with unmatched efficiency, the formulas CleanMax never saw. I showed him receipts, test logs, footage the kind of proof no competitor could ignore. Thomas leaned back, whistling low. "You did all this in your basement. We'd kill to have you. Senior director role, 180 base. And your patents, they stay yours. We'll license, not buy." For a moment, my throat closed. Isla's doctors, her entire care team, were here in Cincinnati. Relocating could undo years of stability. I confessed that fear, expecting a frown. Instead, Thomas nodded. "We'll work around it. Remote flexibility. Travel stipends, you call the terms." I ended the call with my pulse steady, a different kind of fire in my chest. Would I risk stability for revenge or use both to rewrite the rules 2 days later? I stepped through the front doors of CleanMax wearing a pressed black suit I hadn't pulled from the closet in years. The manila envelope under my arm felt heavier than it should, though I knew the real weight was in what it contained. The receptionist gave me a polite smile, but her eyes flickered with unease. Word must have traveled fast. Karen was already in the boardroom when I arrived, flanked by 2 lawyers and a pair of operations executives. They looked up as I entered, their posture stiff, the kind of stiffness that hides nerves. I took the head chair without asking and set the envelope down in front of me. Karen's smile was thin. "Lauren." We weren't expecting. I opened the flap and slid out 3 documents, placing them carefully in the center of the table. Licensing agreements. $1,275 per formula. Per month. Effective immediately. The first laugh came from the younger lawyer, sharp and dismissive. "That's absurd. You don't own these." I let the silence stretch before pulling out the next set of papers, the stamped, dated patents. I spread them across the polished wood like cards in a winning hand. "Actually, I do. Every compound was developed off your clock, off your premises, with my own resources, filed and recorded. You're welcome to check the dates." The laughter stopped. One of the executives leaned forward, scanning the filings, his brow creasing. Karen kept her eyes on me, but her jaw tightened. I leaned in, my voice steady. "Push this, and discovery gets messy. I'm fairly certain your servers still hold emails about quietly phasing me out before Q3. Would you like those read in court?" Her smile faltered. I gathered the contracts back into a neat stack and slid them toward her. "Sign them or lose access. It doesn't matter to me. I've already accepted Summit Labs' offer. I start Monday." The room fell into silence so complete I could hear the hum of the air vents above us. Would they risk a legal war or bow before the woman they tried to break? It took less than 48 hours for the first call to come through. Clean Max's legal team. Their tone clipped but resigned. Confirmed that the licensing contracts were signed and the first payments wired. I thanked them with the same calm they'd mistaken for weakness months earlier, then hung up before the satisfaction could creep into my voice. By the end of that week, Karen was gone. No farewell memo, no staged photo on LinkedIn, just a quiet notice buried in an internal bulletin, organizational changes. It was the kind of disappearance that carried its own verdict. She had bet everything on phasing me out, and now she was the one erased. I didn't celebrate with champagne or colleagues. I celebrated with Isla. That Friday, I picked her up early from school and drove straight to a diner off the interstate, the kind with cracked red booths and milkshakes so thick they clung to the straw. She blinked at me across the table, surprised when I ordered two. "What's going on?" she asked, suspicion tugging at her smile. "Just thought we deserved a treat," I said, letting myself grin for the first time in weeks. Her laugh was small but real, and in that moment I saw the shadow that had hung over us both start to lift. When she leaned across the table and stole a fry from my plate, it felt like oxygen filling a room I hadn't realized was suffocating. On the drive home, we passed the local animal shelter, on impulse. I pulled into the lot. 30 minutes later, we walked out with a scrappy brown mutt missing half an ear and wagging her crooked tail like she knew she belonged to us. "Nova," Isla said firmly, as if the name had been waiting. That night, Nova curled at the foot of her bed while I stood in the doorway, watching my daughter breathe easy in sleep. For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders unclench. But Clean Max wasn't finished. They were about to strike back in the dirtiest way possible. The first headline hit on a Monday morning. Clean Max engineer accused of stealing proprietary formulas. By noon, 3 more outlets picked it up, each quoting an anonymous company insider who painted me as a thief who walked away with their intellectual property. By evening, my inbox filled with messages ranging from pity to venom. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, while Isla scrolled nervously through comments on her phone. "Mom, they can't say this stuff. Right. You didn't steal anything." I swallowed hard. No, I didn't. And we're going to show them the truth. The next day, I uploaded clips from my camcorder, grainy but undeniable. Footage of me mixing compounds at the basement counter, receipts spread beside me, time-stamped logs stacked high. In one clip, Isla, no older than 8, sat at the bar in pajamas, munching cereal while I scribbled formulas into a notebook, proof of both timeline and independence. Within hours, the narrative flipped. Blogs dissected the footage, legal analysts confirmed my filings were airtight, and social media latched onto the image of a single mom fighting corporate theft. Public sympathy swung like a hammer, crushing Clean Max's smear before it gained momentum. At Summit Labs, the air buzzed with momentum of a different kind. I stood in front of Thomas Greer and the R&D team, laying out sketches for a bundled sanitation system, not just one product, but a platform agents, sensors, and protocols designed to work together seamlessly, impossible to copy with a single tweak or stolen formula. 3 months, I told them. We can make this real. The 90-day sprint nearly broke us, but the results spoke louder than fatigue. Cleaning time down by 40%, energy costs slashed 60%. Clients saw savings on day 1 and signed contracts on day 2. As I stood in the lab, prototype humming beside me, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. If CleanMax couldn't steal my past, could they survive my future? A year can change everything? 12 months after they cut my salary to scraps, Summit Labs announced the acquisition of CleanMax. The headlines were clinical merger, integration, synergy, but I knew the truth. CleanMax hadn't been merged. It had been consumed. I walked into their headquarters that morning, the same cold marble floors and sterile glass walls I remembered, but now every step echoed differently. I wasn't the woman begging to be valued. I was the one holding the reins. The boardroom looked the same too. Same table, same chairs, same faint hum from the overhead vents. But the faces were changed. Some of the old executives had vanished, swept out with Karen. The ones who remained avoided my eyes. A few sat up straighter, maybe sensing an opportunity to redeem themselves. I took the seat at the head of the table, the one Karen once guarded like a throne, and let the silence stretch. Finally, I spoke. We're not doing things the old way anymore. If you're here to collect a paycheck and hide behind process, leave now. But if you want to build something better, you'll get every resource I can give you. No one moved, though a few looked down at their hands. The air was thick with shame and possibility. I leaned forward, steady and sharp. You thought 30,000 was my value. But that number bought you your collapse. Next time you see me, remember I'm the woman who put you on your knees. No one dared reply. I stood, gathered my notes, and walked out. In the lobby, Isla waited with Nova sitting obediently at her side, tail thumping against the floor. My daughter's smile was wide, proud, free. I slipped my arm around her shoulders, the weight of power no longer a burden but a choice. A new chapter had begun, not in fear, but in power. Isn't the sweetest revenge not just winning back your worth, but making them pay for underestimating it?